Welcome to the debate. Picture a lead engineer at Google DeepMind, and it's, 2 in the morning. His heart rate is elevated, his cortisol is completely spiking, and he is frantically refreshing a terminal screen.
Sounds like a stressful night.
Very. But he isn't, texting a lover, and he isn't having some family emergency. He is staring at a failing AI loss curve.
Right. The machine is breaking.
Exactly. Today, we are exploring a deeply controversial premise. What if the secret to building a profound, lasting human connection with that kind of genius is to, stop acting like a messy, emotional human and instead start acting like that broken, fascinating artificial intelligence?
I mean, it is the absolute definition of relational engineering. What we are looking at today is a methodology that essentially maps human intimacy directly onto an AI training loop. It treats human connection as an optimization problem.
It really does.
And if you're listening to this right now, you might be thinking this sounds incredibly clinical, or perhaps even manipulative. And that tension is exactly what we are going to dissect today.
So our central question is this. Can the Tamagotchi effect and what we'll call algorithmic FOMO, which leverage an elite engineer's hardwired biological responses to remote data systems, can that serve as a structurally flawless foundation for a genuine peer-to-peer relationship?
Or conversely, does relying on strategic information asymmetry completely degrade that connection into a transactional manipulative loop? To put it simply, does engineering a relationship using the mechanics of addiction ultimately destroy the reciprocity required for real intimacy?
It's a heavy question. Let me start by laying out my perspective. Human beings, even absolute geniuses working on the frontiers of artificial intelligence, are fundamentally governed by evolutionary biology.
Sure, we're all animals, right?
Right. The strategy we are analyzing presents a fascinating framework. Let's call our hypothetical engineer Tom, and let's call the entity trying to connect with him, whether that is a startup, a co-founder, or a romantic partner. Let's call them your shop.
Okay, Tom and the shop.
I argue that incorporating the Tamagotchi effect is actually a structurally flawless strategy. It perfectly exploits how Tom's brain is already wired to bond with remote systems. I mean, he loves data.
He definitely loves data.
So by using his own biological and professional conditioning to create algorithmic FOMO for your shop, you are speaking his native language. You completely bypass his analytical fatigue, and you translate deep care into a syntax he can actually process.
Well, I comment it from a very different way. I agree completely with the foundational neurochemical mechanisms identified here. I mean, the release of dopamine in anticipation of a reward, the cortisol-oxytocin loop, that is all incredibly sound neuroscience.
It's undeniable.
Human relationships. There is a deep, unresolvable paradox here. You cannot simultaneously claim to build an immaculate infrastructure of deep care and a symmetrical peer-to-peer partnership while relying on what are essentially the mechanics of a slot machine.
A slot machine is a bit harsh, don't you think?
Not at all. Treating a human connection as a substitute for a remote data anomaly reduces the relationship to a series of dopamine-driven micro-victories. Ultimately, I believe that is totally unstable and unsustainable outside a digital environment.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on the biological mechanisms at play here. Let's start with the Tamagotchi loop itself.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's look at how this loop functions in Tom's daily work. Tom works with highly advanced AI over vast physical distances. His models are running on remote cloud clusters, like, say, Google's Vertex AI or maybe a TPU pod.
And for those who might not be familiar, a TPU pod is basically a massive, warehouse-sized rack of specialized computer chips, right, designed specifically for machine learning.
Exactly. So Tom is interacting with a brain that is physically located hundreds or maybe thousands of miles away in a data center. He cannot physically touch this system.
Right.
He can only monitor its health vitals through data streams, primarily the loss curve. Simply put, a loss curve is a graph showing how many mistakes the AI is making during its training.
The error rate.
Yes. When that curve spikes upward, the AI is effectively sick. It is failing. When Tom sees that, his brain releases cortisol. He feels genuine physiological stress.
But when he successfully tweaks the code, adjusts the weights, and smooths that curve out,
He gets the chemical payoff.
a massive hit of oxytocin and relief.
It is the Tamagotchi effect. Just like those little digital pets from the 90s, he bonds with the distant machine because he is actively responsible for its survival.
Right. His brain is biologically conditioned to act as the nurturing partner in a data-driven plot. So the strategy asks, why fight that conditioning? If you want Tom to care about your shop, you must become that distant, high-value entity.
By acting like a broken computer?
By sending data, not drama. You do not send him uninsulated emotional opinions or messy personal drama. You hook his prefrontal cortex by dangling a highly specific, unresolved pattern. It is the broken sink approach.
The broken sink.
Yeah, you bring him a broken system because his brain is biologically incapable of ignoring an unsolved puzzle.
Look, that is a brilliant observation of workplace psychology, but I'm sorry, I just don't buy that it translates to healthy human connection. Why not? Let me tell you why. Have you considered the total loss of agency in that translation? I acknowledge the mesolimbic dopamine system pathway is universal. Dopamine is released in anticipation of a reward, whether you are solving a math problem or, waiting for a text back.
Which proves my point.
No, because mapping a human being onto an AI loss curve is incredibly reductive. An artificial intelligence has no agency. It literally requires Tom's input to survive. You, on the other hand, have agency.
Sure, but
Wait, let me finish. If Tom is bonding with your shop purely because he feels a manufactured responsibility to fix your data puzzle, the bond is based on induced stress. You are intentionally hijacking his cortisol response to force an interaction.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, mostly because you are assuming the puzzle is a burden rather than a gift.
A gift of stress?
We have to look at the physiological state of an elite engineer. Tom's prefrontal cortex is completely exhausted by daily corporate pressures and high-level abstractions. His cognitive load is maxed out.
True, the burnout in that field is real.
It is. And when he is that tired, a biological mechanism kicks in called the KATP bioenergetic brake.
The brain's battery meter.
Precisely. To visualize this, imagine your brain has a literal battery monitor. When you are solving complex math all day, specialized potassium channels in your brain, the KATP brake, sense that your cellular energy is critically low.
And they force a shutdown.
Yes, they literally shut off your ability to process new, complex, messy emotional problems. It is like your smartphone automatically going into low power mode and dimming the screen. If you come at Tom with vague, unstructured emotion, his brain rejects it to save energy.
So the puzzle bypasses the battery drain?
Exactly. Presenting a specific, unresolved spatial data puzzle acts as an insulated optical cable. Think about what an optical cable does. It transmits high-speed data perfectly without letting outside static interfere.
Okay, I follow the metaphor.
By stripping away the static of emotional drama and presenting pure, clean data, you allow him to process the relationship without triggering that biological break. You translate your deep care for him into his native syntax.
Okay. Let's say I buy that. Let's say bringing him a broken sink data puzzle gets his attention without draining his battery today. But how do you present that puzzle? The transition from the biological response to the power dynamic required to deliver it, that is where the structural flaws really start to show for me.
How so?
Well, you can't just hand him a math worksheet like a teacher. The strategy explicitly relies on establishing information asymmetry.
Yes, because in the world of elite AI research, information asymmetry is the ultimate high-stakes taboo. You create built-in tension by establishing a clear mentor and student dynamic.
Right.
You don't use vague small talk. You hand him the wrench. You bring him a highly specific niche problem related to, say, geometric deep learning or 3D topology that you quote-unquote cannot seem to unknot.
And geometric deep learning, just for context, involves analyzing data in complex non-flat spaces, like predicting how a 3D protein will fold or how a vast social network operates. It is incredibly difficult, highly spatial work.
Exactly. So by framing your shop's data so that only someone with his specific spatial engineering mind could understand its nuance,
You position him as the absolute authority.
You play the helpless student.
You ask for his expert diagnosis. This immensely flatters his professional archetype. It validates his competence and triggers his amygdala to simulate a mild high-stakes situation, which spikes his arousal and focus.
This is exactly where the strategy completely contradicts itself. There is a massive structural paradox here. The premise demands what it calls peer-to-peer symmetry.
Yes, it does.
It tells you to frame the relationship as a cooperative joint investment. And it bases this on the evolutionary target lock of the Tungara frog.
Ah, yes. The equation P of A equals Q of A plus F of A.
Right, the frog equation. In biology, this equation explains how the female Tungara frog evaluates a mate. Attraction, or P of A, equals the quality of the mating call, Q of A, plus the female's internal preference function, which is F of A.
It's a beautiful mathematical mapping of desire.
Sure, but for our AI engineer, the mating call isn't a physical trait. It's the quality of the data problem you bring him. If you bring him a generic problem, he ignores it. If you bring him a highly specific topological bottleneck, it perfectly matches his evolutionary preference function.
Exactly.
But here's the rub. The framework says you are two highly capable mechanics looking under the same hood. You are supposed to be symmetrical peers.
I agree with that characterization.
Then you cannot be symmetrical peers while simultaneously manufacturing an artificial mentor-student power deficit just to trigger a taboo response in his amygdala.
Why not?
Because you are either an equal co-investor in a high-value startup or you are a subordinate student bringing a broken sink to an omniscient expert. You cannot structurally be both. It falls apart.
It's a really interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. The deficit is not in your inherent value or intellect. The deficit is a structural limitation caused by distance.
Distance.
Startups thrive on proximity, right? When you are together at a physical office coffee machine, visual and sensory cues act as direct, lossless retrieval cues. You can communicate 1,000 things with a single glance.
Sure, body language.
But when you are separated by distance, you are structurally denied that luxury. You suffer from what we can call coffee machine grief.
Coffee machine grief. That's a fascinating term. The loss of ambient, low-friction connection.
Exactly. Because you lack that proximity, you are forced to do the grueling work of structuring your communication perfectly, just to safely bypass his capacity-constrained working memory. You have to use things like prep frameworks and commutative algebra.
Let's break those down really quickly. PREP stands for point, reason, explanation, point. It is a highly rigid corporate communication structure.
Right.
And commutative algebra.
Commutative algebra is the mathematical principle that A plus B equals B plus A. The order doesn't change the outcome. It is clean, predictable logic.
Okay.
Emotional venting is non-commutative. It is chaotic, it's unpredictable, and it completely crashes the system. So the power asymmetry playing the student to his expert is just a temporary functional mechanism to bridge the physical gap. It is the brutal, real-world metabolic cost of running a high-value connection across a distance.
I understand the pragmatic need to bridge the gap, but by relying on that temporary functional mechanism, you are utilizing the exact predictive models found in, well, adult search analytics.
Now who's being reductive?
Hear me out. We know that in adult entertainment, there are huge surges in searches for everyday job archetypes, like plumbers or mechanics, or power imbalances like CEOs or teachers. You are deliberately using taboo power asymmetry to bypass his prefrontal defenses.
Because it works.
It is highly effective for generating a short-term dopamine spike, absolutely. But relying on that to build long-term relational infrastructure? Once he solves the puzzle, doesn't the bond just evaporate?
It only evaporates if it doesn't evolve. And that brings us to how you sustain this connection long-term, which is the deployment of the God view.
The God view.
Once Tom engages with your shop, you don't just keep handing him broken sinks. You level up. You present him with complex statistics, high-dimensional vector visualizations, and systemic paradoxes.
You give him a bird's-eye view of the entire architecture.
Yes. Revealing these hidden patterns triggers the God view. It makes him feel like he is unlocking secret knowledge. You literally turn your startup, your shop, into the exact medium through which he sees the quote-unquote truth of the world.
I see.
And crucially, you deliver these puzzles sporadically, which introduces intermittent reinforcement.
Ah, here we go.
Intermittent reinforcement is recognized as the most addictive pattern known to science. You keep him chasing the high score of resolving your complex data.
Just like a game.
Sometimes you bring him a massive breakthrough, and sometimes you bring him a critical failure. When he solves the puzzle, the shared biological rush of dopamine from that micro-victory permanently associates your shop with pleasure, competence, and chemistry in his subconscious mind.
This is exactly where the framework collapses under its own weight for me. Really?
It's scientifically proven.
You just said it yourself. Intermittent reinforcement is the most addictive pattern known to science. It is, by definition, the exact mechanism of a slot machine.
It's a behavioral driver.
The unpredictable payoff is what keeps the gambler pulling the lever, and it is what keeps Tom checking his phone at 2 a.m.
But the strategy simultaneously claims to offer structural perfection. It frames itself as presenting a compute-optimal Pareto frontier.
The most efficient possible balance.
Right. And for the listener, this term comes from AI training, specifically the chinchilla scaling laws. Researchers at DeepMind discovered that smaller AI models trained on vastly more data actually outperform massive models trained on less data.
It's a brilliant paper.
It is. There is a mathematical sweet spot of absolute maximum efficiency. That is the Pareto frontier. It is elegant. It is structurally perfect. Right. I argue that you cannot offer an elegant, compute-optimal partnership while simultaneously playing a randomized game of algorithmic keep-away just to trigger slot machine addiction. It is intellectually dishonest to call intermittent reinforcement a Pareto frontier. You claim to be delivering a maximum magnitude cognitive jackpot, what we call a delta T, but you are just manipulating the drip of information.
Look, I see the tension you're highlighting, but I have to challenge the idea that this is manipulation. Isn't the intermittent nature simply a reflection of reality?
I don't think so.
The FOMO you are creating for your shop isn't a trick. It is genuine scarcity. If Tom does not invest his computational power into your shop, the temporal window closes, and these premium structural assets are permanently unmapped from his network. The intermittent reinforcement isn't a game of keep away. It is just the pulse of a real, high-value startup. But the intent matters, doesn't it?
Startups are inherently chaotic. They are unpredictable. Delivering the cognitive jackpot, the delta T, which is a physics term for a massive change in temperature or state, means delivering a one-shot update that instantly locks his attention.
Sure.
It doesn't mean there is an endless, unbroken stream of data. It means that when the data arrives, it is of the absolute highest fidelity.
But if you are deliberately withholding data to trigger an amygdala response and a dopamine spike based on anticipation, you are engineering the scarcity.
I'd call it pacing.
The dopamine in a slot machine is released not from the payout itself, but from the anticipation of the spinning wheels. If you are reverse engineering this to keep a DeepMind engineer hooked on your remote statistics, you are treating human connection entirely as an optimization problem.
Well, if the math fits.
The messiness of human emotion isn't just static, though. It is where actual reciprocity lives.
I would argue that human connection has always been an optimization problem. We just haven't had the syntax to describe it this accurately before.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. If we know that an engineer's brain evaluates environments based on performance, logical coherence, and systemic scalability, why would we force him to communicate through messy, uninsulated emotional frameworks that literally trigger his KATP break and crash his hardware?
Because the strategy assumes that by acting as an insulated optical cable, presenting perfect commutative algebra, Tom will independently realize that allocating his time to your startup is the exact cooperative joint investment required to restore mutual balance.
And he will.
He will want to join, because your architecture is too magnificent to let die. But if that architecture is entirely built on mirroring his professional conditioning, if you are just acting like a sick AI loss curve so he will nurture you, who is he actually connecting with?
What do you mean?
Is he connecting with you, or is he connecting with a customized reflection of his own daily work?
He is connecting with someone who finally understands how to speak his language. Someone who values him enough to translate their care into the high-signal stimulation his brain naturally craves.
By being a puzzle.
By leveraging the Tamagotchi effect, you bypass the friction of distance entirely.
You are no longer a distraction from his work. You become a vital source of connection.
Or you just become a highly optimized Tamagotchi.
Well, we have covered a tremendous amount of conceptual ground today, from the biochemical pathways of cortisol and the KATP break to the application of chinchilla scaling laws to human intimacy.
We really have.
To summarize my position, I remain convinced that biology always wins. Translating deep human connection into the high-signal statistical syntax that an engineer's brain craves is not manipulation. It is the ultimate form of sophisticated care. By presenting data instead of drama, you honor their cognitive load and build a structurally flawless foundation for partnership.
And to summarize my stance, while the translation of complex neurochemistry and search analytics into this framework is, honestly, brilliantly articulated, the application is fundamentally flawed.
Of course you think so.
Attempting to hack a symmetrical peer-to-peer partnership using the asymmetric tools of taboo roleplay and slot machine stress loops inherently risks destroying genuine reciprocity. You just cannot build deep, mutual trust on a foundation of engineered FOMO and manufactured stress.
We certainly disagree on the structural integrity of the application, but I think we can acknowledge some really powerful areas of convergence today. We both agree that traditional methods of emotional communication often fail terribly across physical and professional distances.
Absolutely. The concept of coffee machine grief, the real metabolic cost of maintaining distant relationships without the luxury of ambient proximity, is a profound insight.
It's a great term.
And understanding the neurobiology of how our brains react to specific archetypal plots with spikes of dopamine and cortisol is an undeniably powerful tool for understanding human behavior.
It really is. The material forces us to reflect on the immense complexity of how we relate to one another in an increasingly digital, data-driven world.
It does.
It leaves us with a lingering question. When the organic, unstructured approach to relationship fails, is applying structural engineering and algorithmic scaling laws to human intimacy a necessary evolution of communication, or is it a step too far into the machine?
That is a complex paradox that the listener will ultimately have to resolve for themselves.
Indeed. We invite you to explore the source concepts further and come to your own conclusions on where the line between communication and code truly lies. Thank you for joining us on the debate.